I paid my sister's bills for 2 years straight, thinking I was helping her get back on her feet. At family dinner, she called me cheap in front of everyone. That's when I realized my mistake and told her what was really waiting for her next. The silence was delicious. It's funny how life can flip on you, right? One minute, you think you're doing the right thing, being the supportive sibling, playing your part in the family, and the next, you're sitting there at the dinner table, feeling like you've just been slapped across the face with a wet fish. That's pretty much how my Thanksgiving went last year. Let me rewind a bit so you get the full picture. My sister Sarah has always been, well, let's just say she's always danced to the beat of her own drum. Which is fine, you know? We're different people. I'm the practical one, always been a bit of a planner. Worked my butt off since I was old enough to flip burgers to get where I am today. Middle management at a decent tech company, own my little condo, the whole 9 yards. Sarah? Sarah's more artistic, free-spirited. She bounces from one passion project to another, waitressing gigs here and there to keep afloat. No judgment, seriously. If that's your path, that's your path. But paths have consequences, right? And Sarah's path hit a major speed bump about 2 years ago. She lost her waitressing job when the restaurant shut down, and her latest passion project, hand-painted bohemian tote bags, bless her heart, wasn't exactly raking in the dough. Rent was due, bills were piling up, and she was, to put it mildly, freaking out. Being the responsible older brother, I stepped in. We had a long talk. I laid it all out. I told her I could help, but it had to be a hand up, not a handout. We agreed that I'd cover her rent and utilities for a set period. Enough time for her to find a stable job, get back on her feet, and figure out her next move. We even wrote up a little informal agreement, just to make sure we were both on the same page. It wasn't a loan, not exactly. More like an investment in family, in her future. That's how I saw it anyway. Just until I'm stable again, Mark. I promise, she said, all big eyes and grateful smiles. This is going to be a lifesaver. And for a while, it felt like it was. I transferred money to her account like clockwork every month. Rent, electricity, water, internet. Boom, done. Took a chunk out of my savings, sure, and I had to dial back on a few of my own wants. But seeing her relieved face, knowing I was helping my sister avoid eviction, that felt good. Like I was actually making a difference. The first few months were okay. Sarah sent thank you texts, called occasionally to catch up, which usually involved subtle hints about needing extra for groceries or art supplies. I tried to keep a boundary. Rent and utilities, that was the deal. Extras were extras. Sometimes I caved, especially if she painted a really bleak picture of her fridge situation. Guilt is a powerful motivator, you know? But slowly, subtly, things started to shift. The thank you texts became less frequent. The catch-up calls dwindled. And when we did talk, it was more about her complaining, about the soul-crushing temp job she was taking, about how unfair the world was to artists, about how she deserved a break. The stable job she was supposed to be looking for seemed to be taking a backseat to her latest inspiration, vegan baking. Suddenly, she needed a high-end stand mixer, organic ingredients, and a professional-grade camera to document her journey for her non-existent food blog. And guess who she came to for just a little extra help? I started feeling uneasy. I was being taken advantage of, like temporary help was morphing into entitlement. I tried to talk to her about it, gently. Sarah, how's the job search going? I'd ask. Or, remember we talked about this being just until you were back on your feet? She'd brush it off. Oh, you know, it's tough out there, and this baking thing is really taking off. I just need a little more time to make it sustainable. Or, my personal favorite, don't you want to support my dreams, Mark? Is that really too much to ask from your own brother? That guilt thing again. It's a real weapon, especially when wielded by a sister who knows exactly which buttons to push. Months turned into a year turned into 2, and I was still paying her bills. Every single month. Rent, utilities, and now, increasingly, extras. The informal agreement we'd made? Long forgotten, at least by Sarah. Whenever I tried to bring it up, she'd get defensive, even tearful. Accuse me of not trusting her, of not believing in her, of being cheap. Cheap. That stung, especially coming from the person whose bills I was, quite literally, paying. But I swallowed it down. Family, right? You help family. even when family is maybe taking you for a bit of a ride. Then came Thanksgiving, the annual family gathering at our parents' house, the usual chaos, the usual food coma, the usual awkward family dynamics simmering just beneath the surface. This year, though, the simmering threatened to boil over. Dinner was tense from the start. Sarah arrived late, naturally, sweeping in with an armful of brightly wrapped artisanal bread, for which I strongly suspected I had indirectly paid. She looked different, flashier, new clothes, expensive-looking jewelry, definitely not struggling artist vibes. My parents fussed over her, as always. Sarah could do no wrong in their eyes. She was their baby, their creative soul. Me? I was just Mark, reliable, responsible Mark, the one who always had his act together, the one they didn't need to worry about. Which, I guess, was a compliment in its own way. But sometimes, just sometimes, I wished they'd fuss over me a little too. We sat down for dinner. The usual Thanksgiving spread: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, the whole shebang. Conversation bounced around the table, Dad droning on about work, Mom fretting about Aunt Carol's dietary restrictions, the usual. Then somehow the topic shifted to finances. Always a fun one at family gatherings. My Aunt Susan, bless her nosy heart, steered the conversation directly towards me and Sarah. "So Mark, how's work going?" she chirped with that faux sweet smile she always wore when she was about to pry. "Still crunching numbers?" "Pretty much, Aunt Susan," I said, trying to keep it brief. I knew where this was heading. "And Sarah, dear?" Aunt Susan continued, turning her attention to my sister. "Still creating?" Sarah puffed out her chest a little. "Actually, Aunt Susan, my baking business is really starting to gain traction. I'm getting orders, building a following online." She launched into a lengthy monologue about her brand, her vision, her unique selling proposition. Honestly, it sounded like she was reciting marketing jargon she'd picked up from some online guru. My mom beamed. "Isn't that wonderful, Mark? Sarah's really making something of herself." "Yeah, Mom, it's great," I said, keeping my voice even. Inside, though, a little knot of resentment was tightening in my stomach. Making something of herself. With whose money, exactly? Then it happened. The wet fish slap. My cousin Kevin, who's always been a bit of a jerk, piped up. "So Sarah, you're like a real entrepreneur now, making the big bucks?" He snickered, and my dad chuckled along with him. Real supportive family we were. Sarah tossed her hair and gave Kevin a withering look. "It's not about the money, Kevin, it's about the passion, the art." "Oh, here we go." Right, Kevin drawled, still smirking. "Passion pays the bills, huh?" And then Sarah, in a voice dripping with condescension, said the words that made my blood run cold. "Well, it helps to have a brother who's, shall we say, less creatively inclined, but very practical. And, willing to, shall we say, invest in my vision." She shot me a little sideways glance, a smug little smile playing on her lips. The table went silent. Everyone was looking at me. My parents, Aunt Susan, Uncle Joe, even Kevin had shut his mouth for once. All eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. And in that moment, something snapped. Something inside me just broke. 2 years. 2 years of paying her bills, of swallowing my own frustrations, of feeling like I was being taken advantage of, all in the name of family. And this was the thanks I got? Being publicly mocked in front of everyone by the very person I was trying to help, being called cheap by the person living off my dime? The knot in my stomach twisted into a hard, cold ball of anger. And something else too. Something sharper, clearer. Clarity. Suddenly everything was crystal clear. I saw Sarah, really saw her, for the first time in a long time. Not as my baby sister, not as the struggling artist, but as someone entitled, ungrateful, and frankly, kind of cruel. And in that moment of clarity, I made a decision that had been brewing for months, maybe years, but had finally solidified into something firm, something unshakable. I was done. Done being the ATM for my sister's dreams. Done being the practical brother who just footed the bill while she took all the credit. Done being called cheap for the crime of working hard and trying to help my family. I took a slow, deep breath. I looked around the table, meeting each of their eyes, one by one. And then I spoke. My voice was calm, steady, surprisingly so, considering the storm raging inside me. "Actually, Sarah," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "You're right, I am practical, and I am, or rather was, willing to invest in your vision." I paused, letting my words hang in the air. Sarah's smug smile faltered, just for a second. Good. But, I continued, my voice hardening just a fraction, practicality also means knowing when to cut your losses. And frankly, Sarah, my investment hasn't exactly yielded the returns I was hoping for. I could see her starting to bristle, her eyes narrowing. Bring it on, I thought. I was ready. So, I said, taking another breath, effective immediately, the investment is over. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone at the table was frozen, staring at me. Sarah's face had gone white. Her mouth was open, but no words were coming out. My mom finally broke the silence, her voice trembling slightly. Mark, what are you saying? I'm saying, Mom, I replied, still keeping my voice calm but firm, that I will no longer be paying Sarah's rent and utilities. Starting now. Chaos erupted. My mom gasped. My dad sputtered. Aunt Susan actually choked on her cranberry sauce. Kevin just stared, his mouth agape, looking like he'd just witnessed a unicorn spontaneously combust. But it was Sarah's reaction I was watching. Her carefully constructed facade of smugness had completely crumbled. Panic was flickering in her eyes now. Real, raw panic. And a dawning realization, slow and painful, that maybe, just maybe, she'd actually screwed up. Mark, you can't be serious, she finally stammered, her voice rising in pitch. You promised. You said you'd help me. I did promise to help you get back on your feet, Sarah, I said, maintaining eye contact. For a limited time, 2 years ago. Remember that agreement we made? The one you seem to have conveniently forgotten? But, I need your help, she wailed, the tears starting to well up now. The full performance was kicking into gear. I'm just getting started. My business, my baking, I can't do it without you. Actually, Sarah, I said, leaning forward slightly, fixing her with a look that I hoped conveyed just a fraction of the icy calm I was feeling inside. You're about to find out that you can. And then I dropped the bomb. The what was waiting for her next part of the equation. The part that, even I had to admit, felt a little deliciously evil. But hey, she'd earned it. Because, I said, my voice still calm, still steady, but now with a distinct edge. Remember that condo I own? The one I've been working my butt off to pay for? Sarah just stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. Well, I continued, letting the silence stretch out just a little bit longer. I've decided it's time to make a change. Time to rent it out, to generate some passive income. Another pause. Another agonizing, beautiful silence. And then the penny dropped. I saw the understanding dawn in Sarah's eyes. The horror. The absolute gut-wrenching realization of what I was saying. Because you see, Sarah wasn't just living rent-free thanks to my investment. She wasn't just living rent-free in any apartment. She was living rent-free in my condo. My condo. The one I'd painstakingly saved for. The one I'd poured my heart and soul into. The one I'd, out of the goodness of my heart, and maybe a little bit of misplaced brotherly guilt, let her move into when she lost her job 2 years ago. Thinking it was temporary. Thinking I was helping her. Turns out, temporary had stretched into permanent. Turns out, helping had morphed into enabling. And turns out, my baby sister, my creative soul sister, had been living the high life rent-free in my investment property, while casually insulting me at family dinner and calling me cheap. Yeah. The silence was delicious. Finally, Sarah found her voice. Or rather, a strangled gasp that vaguely resembled words. You wouldn't, she choked out, her face contorted with disbelief. You wouldn't kick me out. Where would I go? I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Inside, I was doing a little victory dance. Not my problem, Sarah, I said with a smile that, I'm sure, was just a little bit too wide. You're the creative one. Figure it out. The rest of Thanksgiving dinner was awkward, to say the least. My parents tried to mediate, bless their hearts. My mom pleaded with me to reconsider, to be reasonable. My dad grumbled about families sticking together. Aunt Susan just kept staring, her eyes darting back and forth between me and Sarah, like she was watching a particularly juicy episode of reality TV. Kevin, to his credit, kept his mouth shut, but I could see a flicker of something that might have been respect in his eyes. Maybe even envy? Sarah mostly just sat there, white-faced and silent, occasionally shooting me venomous glares. The artisan bread remained untouched. The turkey grew cold, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. We left shortly after dinner. The car ride home was blissfully silent. I rolled down the windows, cranked up the music, and actually laughed out loud. It felt good. Really good. Like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Like I'd finally stood up for myself. Like I'd finally taken back control. The next few weeks were interesting. My parents called repeatedly, trying to talk some sense into me. Sarah bombarded me with tearful texts and voicemails, accusing me of being cruel, heartless, and ruining her life. I ignored them all. Changed my number, even blocked her on social media. I needed space. I needed to breathe. I needed to enjoy the silence. And you know what? It was glorious. The silence was truly, deeply, deliciously glorious. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't constantly worrying about Sarah's bills, wasn't feeling guilty for saying no, wasn't being taken for granted. I was free. Free from the financial drain, free from the emotional manipulation, free from the endless cycle of resentment and guilt. I did rent out my condo, by the way. Found a lovely young couple who were thrilled to move in. The passive income is nice. But honestly, the money's almost beside the point. The real payoff? The real reward is the peace of mind, the self-respect, the knowing that I finally put myself first. I don't know what happened to Sarah. Haven't heard from her since Thanksgiving. Haven't heard from my parents much either, to be honest. I'm sure she's probably blaming me for all her problems, painting me as the villain in her struggling artist narrative. Let her. I don't care. I paid my sister's bills for 2 years, thinking I was helping her. Turns out I was just enabling her. And in the process, I was slowly drowning myself. Sometimes you have to make tough choices. Sometimes family isn't always the warm, fuzzy, supportive thing you think it's supposed to be. Sometimes family is complicated, messy, even toxic. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to draw a line, to say, enough, to walk away. Even if it means a little delicious silence at Thanksgiving dinner, and for a long time after that. Turns out that silence can be incredibly healing and empowering. Who knew?